It all started with something small. That's how these things go, right? Tiny changes, little ripples in the smooth surface of what you think is your life. It wasn't always like this with Hannah. We had been married for 7 years, lived in the same suburban house just outside of Denver, with the usual rhythms of a couple in their late 30s. I worked in tech consulting, which kept me busy with long hours, and Hannah, an event planner, had her fair share of late nights coordinating corporate parties, weddings, and whatever else she could manage. The first sign was subtle. We had an argument a week ago, something dumb. I can't even remember what started it. It was one of those tense, sharp exchanges, the kind where you think it's over and patched up, but there's a lingering discomfort. After a few days, I figured it was just one of those things. Couples argue. It's normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She was quieter, more distant. Her phone was glued to her hand, and she'd laugh at messages, ones I was never invited to share in. Then came Friday night. It started like any other, but that's when she dropped it. "I'm heading out tonight," she said casually while standing in front of the bathroom mirror, doing her makeup. I looked up from my laptop, momentarily confused. "Out? Where?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but I could already feel a weight in my chest. "There's a party over at Cora's place," she replied, her eyes still fixed on her reflection. "Some of the crew from that last corporate gig will be there." I sat up straighter. "The party we talked about?" I clarified, remembering our conversation from a couple of weeks ago, where I had made it pretty clear I didn't feel comfortable with her going without me. Not that I was controlling, at least I didn't think I was, but it felt off. Something about it. She paused, eyeliner in hand, and looked at me through the mirror. "Yeah, that one." Her tone was dismissive, almost like my opinion didn't really matter. That was new. She'd never been like that before. Usually we discuss things. This time, it was as if she had already decided I wasn't part of the equation. "Hannah, we talked about this," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I told you I wasn't comfortable with." She cut me off, turning around to face me. "And I'm going." End of discussion. She grabbed her car keys off the dresser like the conversation was over, as if my concerns were just background noise. There was a flicker of something in my chest, anger, frustration, maybe both, but I swallowed it down. I didn't want to fight. Instead, I watched as she slipped into the bedroom to change, leaving me with the uneasy feeling I had been carrying for weeks. When she came back out, I almost didn't recognize her. Tight black dress, short, and paired with heels I hadn't seen her wear in years. It was the kind of outfit she used to wear back when we first started dating, when she wanted to make an impression. She looked good. Too good. "Is that really what you're wearing?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "What's that supposed to mean?" She shot back, her tone defensive. She glanced at the mirror one last time, smoothing the fabric of her dress as though I hadn't spoken at all. "I mean," I struggled to find the words, "you're going to Cora's, right? That's more a club look." She ignored me, grabbing her purse. "Don't wait up." And just like that, she was gone, the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway echoing in the silence she left behind. I sat there for a moment, my mind racing, the pit in my stomach growing deeper with every second. Something was wrong. I could feel it, gnawing at me like a dull ache that wouldn't go away. I told myself to stop overthinking it. I was just being paranoid. But then I started connecting the dots. The late nights she'd been working, the way she'd been glued to her phone, the unexplained absences. For the past month, it had been this way. She was always busy, always too tired to talk or do anything when she came home, but somehow full of energy when it came to her phone. It hadn't always been like this. Just a few months ago, things had been normal, or at least what I thought was normal. We had our routines, the comfort of familiarity. But now I wasn't so sure. I spent the next hour pacing the house, moving from room to room like I was looking for something, but couldn't find it. I replayed every interaction we'd had in the past few weeks in my head. Had she been distant? Maybe, but not like this. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. A slight change in how long she took to respond to me, the way she'd brush off conversations, like she had somewhere else she needed to be, someone else she needed to talk to. By midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone, checking the time, 12:07 a.m. Still nothing from Hannah. No texts, no updates. I hovered my thumb over her contact, debating whether to call or text her, but something stopped me. It felt too much like chasing her, like I was the one losing control. I set the phone down and walked to the window, staring out into the dark street. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, the silence of the house pressing in on me. She'd never been like this before, never so secretive. Something clicked. It wasn't the argument from last week. It wasn't the dress. It wasn't even the party. It was everything, the late nights, the phone glued to her hand, her distance. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The clock read 12:40 a.m., and still no word from Hannah. I sat on the couch, my laptop open, trying to focus on work emails, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. The house felt too quiet. I glanced at my phone on the coffee table for what must have been the 10th time in the past 5 minutes. No messages. No missed calls. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Something wasn't adding up. Hannah hadn't been acting like herself for weeks, and this night was only making everything worse. She didn't even bother checking in, as if my concern was irrelevant. My gut was screaming at me now, the kind of feeling you can't shake no matter how hard you try. A voice deep down kept repeating, "Something's wrong, Ethan. Something's really wrong." After another glance at the clock, 12:50 now, I grabbed my phone, thumb hovering over her name in my contacts. A part of me wanted to call her, hear her voice, demand to know where she was. But I hesitated. What if she just brushed me off again? What if she lied, like she had done so easily earlier tonight? I didn't want to seem desperate, but the silence was unbearable. My mind kept spinning with worst-case scenarios, painting pictures of her in places I didn't want to imagine. That's when an idea struck me. Our phone plan. We'd signed up for a shared plan a few years ago, and it had a detailed log of all calls and texts. I had never looked at it before, not even out of curiosity. We'd always had trust between us. But tonight, trust felt more like a fragile concept than a reality. I opened the app on my phone, feeling a strange combination of guilt and necessity. After a few clicks, the call logs popped up. I scrolled through the recent history, my heart rate picking up as I searched for something, anything, that might explain the shift in Hannah's behavior. And there it was, one number, over and over again. I stopped scrolling, staring at the screen in disbelief. The number wasn't familiar. It wasn't any of our friends, family, or colleagues. It wasn't even local, but it appeared repeatedly, stretching back weeks. Calls during work hours, late at night, and some in the early morning hours when I was sure she had been asleep next to me. I clicked into the log, eyes fixed on the pattern. The most recent one had been earlier tonight, right before she left for the party. My fingers tightened around the phone. She had called this person, whoever they were, just minutes before she walked out of the house. That pit in my stomach deepened, threatening to swallow me whole. I sat there, frozen. What was I looking at? A friend? Work? It didn't feel like work. Not at these hours. And why hadn't she mentioned this number? We used to talk about everything, even the small things. Lately, though, she was quieter, more secretive, more distracted. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But how could I not? The evidence was right there. I kept scrolling, noticing that the frequency of the calls had picked up over the past few weeks. It wasn't just the calls, though. There were texts, too, lots of them, at all hours of the day. I couldn't see the content, but the sheer number was enough to make me feel like I had swallowed a block of ice. The urge to confront her was immediate. My thumb hovered over her contact again, and I imagined myself calling, hearing her pick up with some casual excuse about the party. But what if she didn't have an excuse? What if she denied everything? Would I believe her, knowing what I had just found? I couldn't do it. Not yet. Confronting her now, while she was still out, might just give her a reason to shut down or spin some story before I had a chance to get more information. I needed to be smart about this. I set the phone down and ran my hand through my hair, trying to figure out what to do next. A voice in the back of my head told me to wait, to see how she acted in the morning when she came home. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was just overthinking things. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. My thoughts were interrupted by a faint buzzing sound. My phone again. I snatched it off the coffee table, heart jumping, but it wasn't Hannah. It was just another work notification, something meaningless at this point. I tossed the phone back down, feeling the frustration build up inside me. Minutes dragged by, then an hour. Still nothing. The longer I waited, the more suspicious I became. My mind raced with possibilities, scenarios, and questions. Was she even at the party? Was she with someone else? Why hadn't she sent me a single message or even called? I checked the phone log again, searching for more numbers, more connections that might paint a clearer picture. But it was always the same one. Always. I felt trapped between two choices, doing nothing and hoping I was wrong, or diving headfirst into a confrontation that could change everything. A part of me wanted to hold on to the belief that she was just out with friends, that there was nothing sinister about the phone number or the calls. But that part was shrinking fast, drowned out by the gnawing feeling in my gut that I was only scratching the surface of something much darker. The hours dragged on, and eventually exhaustion set in. I found myself back on the couch, eyes heavy, but unable to fully relax. I was waiting for something to happen, waiting for the moment when everything would finally make sense or fall apart. The front door didn't open. The phone stayed silent. And I lay there in the dim light, the weight of suspicion pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Tomorrow. I'd wait until tomorrow. I'd confront her in person, face to face, and see if she could still look me in the eye and tell me everything was fine. I must have dozed off at some point, but it was the light sound of heels clicking against the front steps that jolted me awake. My body snapped upright, eyes blinking as the weight of the previous night's thoughts flooded back in all at once. I glanced at my phone, 7:30 a.m. It took a second for everything to register, the events from last night still hanging heavy in my mind like a fog that wouldn't lift. The front door creaked open, and there she was, Hannah, standing there in the soft morning light, looking like she hadn't slept at all. Her hair was a mess, strands sticking out in odd directions. The makeup she had so carefully applied the night before was now smudged beneath her eyes. And her dress, God, the dress. It was wrinkled, and I could smell the faint mix of perfume and alcohol from across the room. She stood there, framed in the doorway, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Good morning," she said lazily, her voice carrying a casual, almost dismissive tone, like she had just come back from a jog or a quick grocery run. She didn't even flinch as she tossed her purse onto the kitchen counter and slipped out of her heels, her back to me as if I were invisible. I watched her for a moment, feeling a wave of something sharp crawl up my spine. The pit in my stomach deepened. She didn't offer an explanation. She didn't even look like she was about to. That was the part that stung the most, her complete indifference. It was like I was no longer part of the equation. "Where were you, Hannah?" I asked, my voice coming out harsher than I intended. But I couldn't help it. My patience had worn thin. She paused, her fingers brushing through her hair absently, not even turning around to face me. "I told you, Ethan. I went to Cora's party." She shrugged, grabbing a glass from the cupboard as if this were a normal Sunday morning. I stood up from the couch, watching her carefully. "You stayed out all night. No calls. No texts." My fists clenched slightly. "I waited up for you." She finally turned to look at me, raising an eyebrow. "Ethan, we're not teenagers. Do I really need to give you minute-by-minute updates on where I am?" She rolled her eyes, setting the glass down with a clink that felt louder than it should have. That coldness in her voice sent a chill through me. The Hannah I knew, the woman I married, would never have been this dismissive. But this version of her standing in front of me now was someone I barely recognized. "It's not about that, and you know it," I said, stepping closer, my voice steady but simmering with frustration. "You didn't even call to say you were staying out all night. You didn't even." "Drama," she muttered, cutting me off. "That's all this is. You're overreacting. I told you I was going out. What's the big deal?" She waved her hand in the air, as if to brush the whole thing aside, like it was nothing. My jaw tightened. "You were out until 7 in the morning, Hannah. I'm not overreacting. Something's not right, and you know it." Her eyes narrowed, her gaze turning sharp. "Oh, please. Don't start with the whole something's not right nonsense. I was at the party. That's it. You're making a scene over nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Not by a long shot. The phone logs, the missed calls, the number I didn't recognize, it all sat in my chest like a stone. I knew something was off, but I wasn't going to accuse her just yet. Not without more. She turned her back on me again, walking toward the bedroom without so much as a glance in my direction. "I'm going to shower," she said over her shoulder, disappearing down the hallway. I stood there for a moment, the quiet of the house settling in around me again. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what had just happened. Her blatant disregard, the way she didn't even flinch when I confronted her. It was as if she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I made my way toward the bedroom, following her path, but something caught my eye before I reached the door. The laundry basket, sitting half full near the hallway closet. And there, on top, was the dress she had peeled off. My eyes moved downward, and that's when I noticed it, a pair of her panties tossed carelessly on top of the pile. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the gnawing suspicion that had been haunting me all night. Whatever it was, I stepped closer, kneeling down to get a better look. That's when I saw it. I picked them up, my fingers trembling slightly as I held them in my hand. There were faint secretions, unmistakable evidence that she hadn't just been at some innocent party. My heart sank, a cold realization settling in. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was proof. I stood there, staring at the panties, feeling the walls close in around me. What the hell was I supposed to do with this? My mind raced in 100 different directions, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Not without more. If she was capable of brushing off a night out, she'd be able to dodge this too. I needed more answers before I could accuse her outright. I set the panties back down on top of the pile, trying to calm the storm raging inside of me. This was only the beginning. Something was happening, something she wasn't telling me. And I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without the truth coming out. I backed away from the laundry, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I heard the water turn on in the bathroom, the sound of the shower masking the silence of the house. My mind kept flashing to the phone number, to those strange late-night calls, and now this. By the time Hannah stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around her body, her hair still wet, I had already distanced myself from the scene. The laundry basket, her panties, the growing pit of dread in my stomach. I pushed it all aside, forcing myself to stay composed. I had questions, more than I could count, but the answers wouldn't come from confronting her now. Not when everything felt like it was teetering on a razor's edge. She walked past me in the hallway. Not a word, just that same cold indifference that she had greeted me with earlier. It was like I didn't exist. Like we didn't exist. And if that wasn't a sign, I didn't know what was. I had to dig deeper. Later that day, she left again, something about meeting a client or prepping for another event. I barely listened. All I knew was that the moment the front door clicked shut, I was in action. My instincts told me there was more to this than I'd uncovered, and I wasn't going to wait around for her to tell me. I moved to the bedroom, scanning the room quickly. Where would she hide something important? My eyes landed on the bedside table, the one she always kept closed. I knelt down, carefully opening the drawer. Inside, there was nothing unusual at first glance. Some old receipts, a few books she hadn't finished, but then my hand brushed against a small plastic container tucked beneath a pile of papers. I pulled it out, my breath catching in my throat. A small bottle of pills. I turned it over in my hand, reading the label, antibiotics. They were for treating or preventing certain types of infections, specifically ones that involved female genital health. My heart pounded in my chest, the realization dawning on me in waves. Why was she taking these? And more importantly, why hadn't she told me? I stood there for a long moment, staring at the bottle, feeling my world tilt on its axis. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was physical. Whatever or whoever she had been involved with, it was enough to put her at risk, which meant I could be at risk too. I could feel the blood draining from my face as the pieces started to fall into place. The secret calls, the sudden late nights, the defensive attitude, the unexplained changes in her behavior. And now this. The cold knot of suspicion that had been gnawing at me since last night had finally turned into something darker, something real. I had to know. I had to be sure. I put the pills back where I found them, careful not to disturb anything else, and stood up. I couldn't wait around for her to slip up. I needed to protect myself. The thought that whatever she was doing behind my back might have affected my health now consumed me. My mind flashed to the panties in the laundry, the bottle in my hand. All of it pointed in one direction. I grabbed my phone and quickly searched for a clinic nearby that could handle a discreet test. Something quick, something that wouldn't take long to get results. It wasn't just about answers anymore. Now, my health was at risk, and that terrified me more than anything. I called the clinic, setting up an appointment for that afternoon. They asked me a few questions over the phone, questions that made the reality of the situation hit harder. When was my last sexual encounter? Had I noticed any symptoms? Was I aware of any partners being involved with other people? I answered them as best as I could, trying to keep my voice steady, but the truth was I was spiraling. Once the appointment was set, I sat down on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. I was in too deep now. There was no walking away from this without knowing the full truth. Hannah came home later that evening, casual as ever, dropping her keys onto the counter like nothing had happened. I barely acknowledged her, my mind racing, thinking of the clinic visit. I'd gone earlier, had the test done. It had been surreal, answering their questions, the sterile atmosphere, making everything feel cold and clinical. The nurse had been polite, asking about my health, and I had lied to cover for my wife. Told them I was just getting checked as part of a routine, nothing serious. But we both knew it wasn't routine. "How was your day?" she asked, standing by the fridge as if everything was fine. "Fine," I said quickly, trying to keep my voice even, though the tension in my chest was building. I couldn't look at her. Not yet. She poured herself a glass of water, sipping casually, her eyes drifting away from me. No sign of guilt. No indication that anything had changed for her. It was infuriating how easily she could go through the motions, but I kept my composure. "I'm meeting up with Stacy tomorrow," she added, as if that explained everything. "She's been swamped at work, so we're going to grab lunch." Stacy. Another name, another alibi. I barely responded, nodding slightly while my mind ran over what I had found. The pills, the phone number, the endless trail of doubt. I had played this game long enough, letting her weave whatever story she wanted, while I stood by, trying to believe the best. But the best had never been part of the equation. Not anymore. The clinic had said I'd get the results back in a day or two. And when those results came in, I'd finally know the truth. Whether she admitted it or not, whether she lied to my face or continued this charade, the truth would be undeniable. As the evening wore on, she slipped into bed early, pretending to be exhausted from a long day. I didn't follow. Instead, I sat in the darkened living room, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. The weight of everything felt like it was pressing down on me, suffocating in its silence. The clinic called around noon the next day. I had been sitting at my desk, mindlessly staring at my laptop screen, when my phone buzzed. My heart jumped into my throat. The number on the screen was familiar. The clinic. I hesitated for a split second before answering, already knowing that whatever was about to be said would change everything. "Hi, is this Ethan?" The nurse's voice was calm, professional, but there was a gravity to her tone that made my palms sweat. "Yeah, this is Ethan," I replied, my voice tight. I had to brace myself. "Okay, Ethan, we have your test results back." There was a slight pause on her end, like she was giving me time to prepare. "You tested positive for a minor bacterial infection. It's not serious, and we've caught it early. I'll prescribe you a course of antibiotics, and you should be completely fine in a couple of weeks." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. My stomach churned. A bacterial infection. My mind raced back to the bottle of pills I found in Hannah's drawer. It all made sense now. She had known. She had already been treating herself, quietly trying to erase the evidence. "Do you have any questions?" the nurse asked. No, that's fine. Thanks," I mumbled before quickly ending the call. I stared at my phone, the weight of everything crashing down on me. There was no more room for denial. The pieces had all fallen into place. The panties, the pills, the late-night calls to that number, the unexplained absences. Hannah had been sleeping with someone else, and now I had the proof. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind swirling, replaying the past few weeks over and over again. I had been blind. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I was too wrapped up in my own life to notice. But now, the truth was staring me in the face, and there was no more hiding from it. The front door creaked open around 6 p.m., just as I was going over the words in my head for the 100th time. Hannah walked in, looking as calm as ever, her face unreadable. She greeted me with the same casual indifference, hanging up her coat and heading straight for the kitchen without even a glance in my direction. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Hannah," I called out, standing up from the couch. My voice was hard, colder than I had intended, but I didn't care. "We need to talk. Now." She turned, her eyes narrowing slightly, sensing the shift in my tone. "Can it wait? I just got home and—" "No, it can't." I cut her off, stepping into the kitchen. I saw the flicker of annoyance cross her face, but she didn't say anything. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms, waiting for me to continue. I didn't waste any time. "I went through your things," I said, my eyes locked onto hers, watching for any sign of a reaction. "Your drawer. I found the pills." Her expression remained neutral, but I saw a flash of something behind her eyes, something guarded. "You went through my stuff?" she said, her voice low, calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. "Yes, I did," I replied. "And I know why you've been taking them. Because I got tested too." That got her attention. I watched as her arms uncrossed slightly, her posture stiffening. The calm exterior was beginning to crack. "They called today," I continued, my voice steady now. "I have a bacterial infection. Nothing serious, thankfully. Just a minor one." I took a step closer. "But you knew that already, didn't you?" Her eyes met mine for a long moment. She didn't say anything at first, but her jaw tightened. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how to play this. "So what?" she finally said, her tone defensive, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You went through my things, snooping around, and now you're accusing me of something?" I laughed, bitter, hollow. "Accusing you? No, I'm done with accusations. I know what's going on, Hannah. You've been lying to me for weeks. The late nights, the secret phone calls, there's been someone else, hasn't there?" She opened her mouth to protest, to throw back some half-baked excuse, but I cut her off before she could even start. "Don't lie to me," I snapped, my voice rising. "I found your panties in the laundry. I saw the pills. I know about the calls, the texts. Just tell me the truth, Hannah. Stop pretending like I'm the one who's crazy." She stared at me, her face blank for a few seconds, like she was trying to decide whether to keep up the facade or finally come clean. Then, her shoulders slumped, and something in her eyes shifted, resignation. "Fine," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I've been seeing someone." The words hung in the air like a weight. I felt a sick twist in my stomach, but I pushed through it. I had to know everything now. I couldn't stop here. "Who?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Who is it?" She hesitated, looking away for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "His name's Connor," she finally admitted, her voice cold. "He's a lawyer. I met him through work." I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of anger ripple through me. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly, though I tried to keep it steady. "A few months," she said, her eyes darting to the floor. "A few months?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've been cheating on me for months, Hannah?" "Months?" She straightened up, her face hardening, that same cold indifference slipping back into her tone. "It's not like that. It wasn't serious." "Not serious?" I laughed again, but it was sharp, laced with bitterness. "Are you kidding me? You've been sneaking around with some lawyer for months, risking my health, and you're telling me it wasn't serious?" She flinched, but she didn't back down. "It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. It was just something I needed." Her voice was colder now, almost detached. "You've been so distant, Ethan. Wrapped up in your work, never paying attention to me. It wasn't like I was looking for something more, okay?" My blood boiled. The audacity, the way she tried to justify it, like I was supposed to feel guilty for her betrayal. "You needed something?" I shot back. "So this is my fault now? You've been lying to me, cheating on me, and now you're telling me this is because I've been distant." She didn't answer right away, just crossed her arms tighter, her gaze hard, unyielding. "You didn't even notice when things started changing between us," she said, her voice sharp. "I was practically invisible to you." I shook my head, anger flooding every inch of me. "You were never invisible, Hannah, but you made yourself disappear." I couldn't even look at her anymore. The anger, the betrayal, The sheer gall of her trying to pin this on me. It was overwhelming. I hadn't slept. The house felt suffocating after the confrontation with Hannah. She stayed in the bedroom, while I sat alone in the living room, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The truth was out in the open, but it hadn't brought any relief. If anything, I felt more trapped than before. There was no going back from what she had said, no way to erase the disgust that came with every word she'd used to justify her betrayal. I stared at my phone for a long time. One name kept flashing in my mind, Lauren. She had been Hannah's best friend for as long as I could remember. They were inseparable. Lauren was there for every event, every dinner party, every vacation. If anyone knew what was going on, it would be her. I had no choice. I needed answers from someone who wasn't going to lie to my face. I needed to know if this had all been going on right under my nose while I was too blind to see it. With a deep breath, I called Lauren. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice bright, like she hadn't been expecting me. "Hey, Ethan, what's up?" "Lauren," I started, but my voice was tight, tense. I could feel the frustration bubbling under the surface. "I need to talk to you." "About Hannah." There was a slight pause, just enough for me to notice. "Hannah? Is everything okay?" "No," I said bluntly, my grip tightening on the phone. "It's not. I found out about Connor." Another pause. This one longer. "Connor?" Her tone shifted, a hint of discomfort sneaking in. "Who's Connor?" I clenched my jaw. She was already trying to dodge the truth. "Don't play dumb, Lauren. You know who he is. The lawyer. The guy Hannah's been seeing behind my back." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, almost too quickly, like she had rehearsed the response. "I haven't heard anything about this." I could feel my patience slipping away. "Lauren, don't lie to me. I'm not calling to point fingers at you, but I need the truth. I need to know how long this has been going on. Did you know? Did you cover for her?" I don't," she stammered, the confident tone fading, replaced by something more unsure, more vulnerable. "Ethan, I don't know what you're accusing me of." "I'm not accusing you of anything. Yet," I replied, my voice hardening. "But I need to know if you've been helping Hannah cover this up. Just tell me the truth." Silence hung in the air between us for a few seconds, the tension growing thicker. Then, I heard her sigh, and the facade finally cracked. "Ethan, look, it's complicated," she began, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "I didn't want to get involved, okay? This wasn't my place to say anything." "So, you did know," I said, the confirmation landing like a punch to the gut. I could feel my heart racing, the betrayal hitting me in waves. "You've been lying to me. Every time she told me she was out with you, you were covering for her." "I didn't want to," Lauren said quickly, her voice rising, defensive now. "You don't understand, Ethan. She's been unhappy for a long time. She didn't know how to tell you. She said you wouldn't listen." I could feel the anger bubbling over now. Every word she said like fuel to the fire. "Unhappy? She's been cheating on me for months, Lauren. You knew, and you just stood by and let it happen?" "You don't understand," she repeated, her tone more urgent now. "Hannah said things between you two were bad. She said you were distant, that you were always working. She felt, I don't know, invisible. She didn't tell me everything at first, I swear. I only found out about Connor later, but by then, what was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to tell me the truth," I snapped. "Instead, you let her lie to my face. You gave her excuses, covered for her, and let this continue while I sat here like a fool." "I didn't want to hurt you, Ethan," she pleaded. "Hannah made it sound like things were over between you two already. She said you'd checked out of the marriage. She didn't think you cared." I could barely believe what I was hearing. Hannah had been spinning this story behind my back, painting me as the distant husband, the one who had driven her away. And Lauren had bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. "She's been playing you, Lauren," I said, my voice icy. "She's been manipulating you, just like she manipulated me. She's been justifying her affair by blaming me. Did you ever stop to think that maybe, just maybe, she was lying to you too?" There was another long silence on the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in Lauren's head, the realization slowly dawning on her. "I didn't think," she started, her voice shaking now. "She said she felt trapped, that you were controlling. That's why I didn't say anything." "Controlling?" I scoffed. I've been distant because I've been working my ass off to provide for us. I've never controlled her, Lauren. Never. But she's twisted everything to make herself the victim. Lauren was quiet, and I could tell she was struggling with the weight of her own betrayal. She had trusted Hannah, believed her lies, and now she was caught in the middle, just another casualty of Hannah's deception. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know it was like this." I leaned back, rubbing my eyes with my free hand. The exhaustion, the frustration, it all weighed on me like a heavy fog. "It's too late for apologies, Lauren. I just needed to know the truth. And now I do." "I should have told you," she admitted. "I should have said something." "Yeah," I said, my voice cold. "You should have." There was nothing more to say after that. We ended the call, the bitter taste of betrayal still fresh in my mouth. I sat there, staring at the phone, replaying everything Lauren had said. Hannah had spun her web so carefully, trapping everyone around her in her lies. She had painted me as the bad guy, the one who had pushed her into someone else's arms. And all this time, her friends had bought it. But now the truth was out. I saw the manipulation for what it was, and I knew exactly who Hannah had become. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just Connor. It was the way she had destroyed everything around her, pulling her friends into the lies, poisoning everything we had built together. I was done being her pawn, done being the fool she took me for. It was time to take back control. I sat at the kitchen table, staring down at the glass of water in front of me. The bottle of antibiotics sat beside it, unopened, a silent reminder of everything that had happened. I hadn't taken them yet, not because I didn't want to get better, but because once I did, it would mean accepting everything. It would mean fully acknowledging the depth of Hannah's betrayal, not just emotionally, but physically. Her lies hadn't just destroyed our marriage. They had put my health at risk, and yet I had to face it. I grabbed the bottle, twisting the cap off and shaking one pill into my palm. As I swallowed it, I could feel a shift inside me, a cold, hard resolve settling into place. This wasn't just about catching an infection. This was about reclaiming control. She had manipulated me, lied to me, endangered me, but no more. It was time for her to face the consequences. I heard the door open. Hannah's familiar footsteps echoed down the hall as she walked into the kitchen. She was calm, too calm, as if everything was back to normal. Like we hadn't just had the most devastating conversation of our lives. "Hey," she said casually, heading toward the fridge. "You want anything for dinner?" I was thinking we could. I didn't let her finish. "Hannah, sit down," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. There was no warmth left in me. No trace of the man who had once loved her, who had once believed in her. "We need to finish this." She stopped, turning to look at me, confusion flickering across her face. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice softer now, more cautious. But I wasn't playing her games anymore. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." For a moment, I thought she would argue, but then she sighed, dropping her casual act and sliding into the chair opposite me. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine, like she could already feel the weight of what was coming. "I know about everything, Hannah," I said, my voice cold and steady. "The pills, the infection. I got tested, and now I'm on antibiotics to deal with what you brought home." Her face paled. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, until finally she spoke. I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she whispered, her eyes dropping to the table. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know it would." "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "This isn't about what you wanted or didn't want. This is about what you did. You lied to me. You cheated on me. And then you endangered my health without a second thought. Do you understand that?" She flinched, her hands trembling slightly on the table. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to handle things. It just got out of control." "Out of control?" I repeated, disbelief laced in my tone. "You had an affair for months, Hannah. You lied to me, manipulated everyone around you. And now you want to tell me it just got out of control? Like it was some kind of accident." She shook her head, her voice growing more desperate. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I never wanted things to end like this. We can fix it, Ethan. We can work through this." We've been together for so long. We can stop. I raised my hand, silencing her again. The old Ethan, the one who would have let her explain, the one who would have given her the benefit of the doubt, was gone. No, we can't fix this. Not anymore. Her eyes widened, the panic finally settling in. Ethan, please don't say that. I know I messed up, but we can still work through this. We can go to counseling. We can. I'm filing for divorce, I said, cutting through her pleading like a blade. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. She blinked, frozen for a moment, as if she couldn't process what I had just said. What? She breathed, her voice barely audible. I'm done, I said, leaning back in my chair. There's no going back from this. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I'm contacting a lawyer tomorrow, and we're getting a divorce. This marriage is over, Hannah. Her face twisted in disbelief, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. You can't be serious, she said, her voice trembling. Ethan, this isn't how it ends. You can't just throw everything away over one mistake. One mistake. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Hannah, this wasn't one mistake. This was months of lies, of deceit. You've been cheating on me, lying to my face, using your friends to cover for you. You risked my health without a second thought. You've been gaslighting me, telling me I was the problem, when all along, it was you. She stared at me, her eyes wide and glassy, and for the first time, I could see the cracks in her armor. The cold indifference, the casual detachment, it was all falling away. She had never expected this. She had never thought I would be the one to walk away. Ethan, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. We've been together for so long. Don't throw it all away. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor as I moved toward the kitchen counter. I grabbed the bottle of antibiotics, holding it up in front of her. This is what you've thrown away, Hannah, I said quietly. This is what's left of our marriage. Lies, betrayal, and pills to clean up your mess. I'm done being the guy who stays. I'm done being the one you take for granted. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. I had given her everything, my trust, my love, my loyalty, and she had torn it all apart without a second thought. I set the bottle back down on the counter, turning to leave the kitchen. I'll be staying somewhere else tonight. When I get back, we can figure out the rest of this. But for now, we're done. I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked out of the kitchen, the weight of the conversation settling over me like a heavy fog. As I reached the front door, I paused, hearing the faint sound of her sobs behind me, but I didn't turn back. This was it, the end. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. The weight was lifting slowly but surely. I wasn't free yet, but I was getting there, step by step. As I got into my car, I glanced down at my phone. The contact for the lawyer was still there, ready to be dialed. Tomorrow, I would make the call. Tomorrow, I would take the next step toward reclaiming my life. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt in control again. Hannah had taken so much from me, but she wouldn't take my future. I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving her lies behind me, 1 mile at a time. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe to the channel, put a like under the video, and write a comment about how you like this story.